Good morning and welcome. Welcome to the Livestock Producers Freedom Rally. I'm Doris Lowing. I'm the Executive Director of the South Dakota Stock Growers Association and will act as your moderator today. It is my honor and privilege to bring here today livestock producers, livestock organizations, auction companies, and legislators, along with our voices and concerns in unison to the United States government mandate. Are you proud to be a livestock producer? Are we going to let the government overrule us? Today, we are going to provide you with truth and information regarding the APHIS mandate to use electronic ID. To begin, I'd like to invite South Dakota Stock Grower President Chuck Willard and a rancher from Belvedere to begin us with a prayer and lead us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you would please stand and remove cover, and also please silence your phones.
Thank you. Father, we just praise you for all that you do. We thank you, Lord, for your presence here today. You've said that we, your followers, your believers, Christians, are the salt of the earth. And so, Lord, we pray that we take a stand today. We ask for wisdom, discernment, in order to carry out, Lord, the purpose that you've created each of us for. And we ask a blessing today now on this group, on this program. And Lord, we thank you so much for all who have come to stand united for this country that we love. So now we just pray these things in the precious name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I first want to tell you just a little bit about the South Dakota Stock Growers Association. We are the oldest cattle organization in the United States. It was our organization in the 1880s who represented the territories of Dakota, Wyoming, and Nebraska to record and publish cattle brands to identify ownership. 2 years later, the association was officially organized to fulfill this brand recording, administration, and policy of our livestock producers. In 1883, we were incorporated with the state of South Dakota. This alone explains that for 133 years, we have advocated for livestock producers and property owners by identifying and using this form to trace ownership along with a bangs tag, to quickly pinpoint and respond, trace to animal diseases, along with the use of our brands. I would like my board of directors and past presidents to please stand and be recognized. Everyone. Thank you all for your time and service to this organization. Today we come as one voice, no matter what our affiliation is, our religious preference, ethnic or social status. If you are not already, we encourage you to join one of our organizations as you see and will learn more that they are voices to Washington, D.C. We have a booth with RCAF and with USCA. Please take time, if you don't have time today, take brochures home, learn about these organizations, because we need your help as members. We come as cow-calf producers, feedlot owners, backgrounders, auction barns that this mandate will affect. We all have toolboxes with those tools that we want to use in our daily operation. How many use these? Who gets this information? You. Who else should get this information? No one. I come to you today with the mandate. This little tag will be in every breeding stock crossing state lines. You say that's not much? It's not much. But what happens when they take a little and they take more? They talk about giving all of our producers these to tag your livestock. They don't talk about what this thing costs. They don't talk about where this information is stored. They don't talk about a premises. So today you will hear this stuff of the reasons why we are not in favor of this mandate. This information is supposed to be stored with a company called U.S. Cattle Trace Initiative. It has multiple partners in the country. I ask you to go home and look at Cattle Trace and see who their board of directors are. See who their partners are. I think you'll see the word Cargill pop up. So is this going to be a private information for you people? Or is this going to be public? So it is my pleasure today that you are going to hear from numerous people explaining in depth of what we have just stated. And it is my honor and privilege that I am going to present to you as our first speaker one of our biggest advocates in Washington, D.C. here today, Representative Harriet Hageman. She is an American politician, a trial attorney, serving as U.S. Representative for Wyoming at-large congressional district since 2023. And boy, has she shook up Washington. She is a fourth-generation Wyomingite. She serves on the Committee of Judiciary, Subcommittee of the Administrative State, Regulatory Reform and Antitrust Subcommittee, and Constitution and Limited Government. She also serves as Committee on Natural Resources. Representative Harriet Hageman has tirelessly defended against excess government control and supporter of fossil fuel energy. Please welcome Representative Hageman.
Well, it's such an honor to be here today, and thank you for inviting me for this incredibly, incredibly important conference for us to talk about what I think is one of the bigger threats to the livestock industry. I'm so thankful to be able to spread the word about this disastrous rule and regulation coming out of the Biden-Harris administration and what it will ultimately do to our livestock producers and our food supply. I really don't have to tell this crowd much in terms of in describing the major fights that we have been in and specifically with regard to this rule. But there are some things that I want to go back over. I want to talk a little bit about the history about how we got here. I actually have been fighting this battle for over 5 years, but this battle started in about 2010 or 2011. And in 2011, APHIS and USDA decided that they were going to come up with an RFID rule, and they brought it to the livestock producers, and they created a federal advisory committee. We have a gentleman here in the room today who was a member of that committee way back then, almost 15 years ago. But the industry fought back hard, and the idea at that time was that there was going to be mandatory RFID ear tags and that you would not be able to use other forms of traceability and identification. Because the industry rallied and refused to allow USDA and APHIS to dictate what they were going to do, in 2013, the USDA issued a final rule that basically said that they would continue to recognize all traditional forms of identification. If you wanted to use RFID ear tags, so be it. That was your choice as a producer. But you could also use brands and back tags, tattoos, ear tags, etc. So then that rule worked well. In fact, we have the highest quality cattle and highest quality beef of any place in the world. Everybody in this room knows it, USDA knows it, other countries know it as well. But starting in 2019, there was this really strange thing that appeared one day on the APHIS website, and it was a 2-page document. It was called a fact sheet. And it said by January 1, 2023, all livestock producers, all cattle producers and bison owners would have to have RFID ear tags on their cattle by January 1, 2023, just 3 years away at that point. And I received a call from Tracy Hunt out of Newcastle, and he said, we just received this document. Somebody notified me about this. What is this? He said, is this a rulemaking? I mean, what is this? And I started looking into it, and really what they referred to it as is a guidance document. USDA and APHIS were trying to slip this through without anybody even understanding what it would do, but it was contrary to the 2013 rule. It was contrary to the authority that USDA has, and it was a violation of the Administrative Procedure Act. So between Kenny Fox and Roxy and Tracy and Donna Hunt and RCAF, we filed a lawsuit, and we challenged that 2019 fact sheet, and we were able to get it blocked. And since then, the USDA has worked tirelessly to try to force our cattle industry and our bison industry to use RFID or EID ear tags. I have continued to fight back against that, but one of the challenges that I have with this particular administration, and really agencies in general, is they don't recognize the separation of powers. They don't recognize that the USDA isn't empowered to make law. The USDA is only entitled to carry out the law as Congress has written it. Well, Congress has never mandated an EID ear tag requirement. Congress has never ordered our livestock producers to use EID or RFID. But USDA and APHIS and some of our big producers and our packers and the ear tag manufacturing companies are the ones that have attempted to push this through over the last more than decade. They've been pushing this through. So here we are. It is obvious that the implementation of this rule would provide an outsized benefit to large corporations. It would provide nothing, however, to our smaller and our independent producers. Now, keep in mind, I am not opposed to RFID ear tags. I'm not opposed to EID ear tags, but it should be your choice. It should not be mandated by the federal government. What this rule is really about is it is about the consolidation of power in the hands of a few at the expense of the small and independent farmers and ranchers, and it is a threat to our entire food supply. This rule reveals a tremendous amount of cynicism towards American cattle and bison ranchers. Our livestock producers, as I said, you have implemented the world's most innovative and advanced practices in relation to animal welfare and precision herd health management, while also producing the highest quality beef in the world. APHIS claims that this is about traceability, that we need to be able to use EID ear tags so that we can immediately trace if there is a disease outbreak. But we know that that is not true, and we know that because of exactly what APHIS and USDA have done in adopting this rule. I would point to the fact that APHIS itself has repeatedly said that it would require compliance at least 70% for there to be an effective traceback system. In other words, 70% of our producers would have to use EID ear tags in order for it to be an effective traceability system. Yet with the latest rule that came out, they state that this rule will only apply to 11% of our producers. Keep that in mind, 11% of our producers. And you know who that 11% is? It's the vast majority of our independents in states like Wyoming, where we don't have big packing plants and big feedlots. So if you don't have to move your cattle across state lines, as you wouldn't have to necessarily in Kansas or Texas or Oklahoma or Iowa or Ohio, Nebraska, this rule doesn't apply to you. This applies to our independent producers in Wyoming, South Dakota, North Dakota, places like that. So if it only applies to 11%, what would be the purpose of doing this? Well, this is your classic example of what government does, and it's called incrementalism. We start small, and then we move on to the next group, and then we move on to the next group, and then we move on to the next group. And the other reason that they do this is that they're trying to minimize what the actual cost of this program would be. According to USDA, according to the rule that they have issued, this EID mandate covering 11% of our producers would cost $26.1 million to implement. Now think about that. Okay, well, if it only applies to 11% of our producers, once they make it apply to everyone, that's a $250 million program. That's a $250 million hit against our livestock producers. So again, it's incrementalism. They want to start small so that everybody thinks, well, it's just not that big of a deal. It's not going to cost that much. That's $250 million. $250 million to have a full traceability system that all of you will be the ones who bear it. You will be the ones who pay for this. $250 million. But you know what's interesting? You just saw that little tiny air tag, this little thing right here. That $26.1 million, that's what it covers. That's what it covers. They're estimating that this little tag right here for 11% of our industry would cost $26.1 million. Can you imagine how much money these ear tag manufacturing companies are making? Now you understand why they're advocating for mandatory EID. That doesn't cover the cost of the wands. That doesn't cover what you have to spend for handling the cattle to put the ear tags in. It doesn't cover the retrofitting of our sale barns. Yet they're the ones that are going to have to enforce this. Because the purpose of this is to block access to the market for anyone who refuses to comply with this mandate. None of those costs are included in the $26.1 million. So we know for an absolute fact that that $26.1 million doesn't even come close to covering the cost. And how else do we know that? Because in 2013, when USDA first issued the rule, they stated that a full-blown RFID mandate would cost between $1.2 and $1.9 billion. Billion dollars. Do you think the cost of this has gone up or gone down? And yet they come out with a rule and say, hey, don't worry. It's only going to cost $26.1 million. This is a situation where the USD mandate is a damned if you do and a damned if you don't scenario for the ranchers, with non-compliance meaning a blocking of access to our traditional markets and restricting our ability to sell livestock across state lines. At the very same time that compliance is so cost prohibitive, it's only the big guys who are going to be able to do it. The fact is that this is going to further vertically integrate our industry, and it's going to make the big guys bigger and the small guys disappear. Knowing this, the agency bureaucracy has avoided providing legitimate cost estimates across the board. As I've indicated, that $26.1 million that they've identified in this rule, they have only requested $15 million for implementation. So in the rule, they say it's going to cost the 11% of the industry that's subject to it $26.1 million, and we know that it's dramatically higher than that, but they've only asked for $15 million to implement the program. And I have ranchers who have come up to me and said, look, Harriet, you got to stop fighting this stuff. Yeah, we don't like mandates either. We don't think mandates are good, but you got to get with the program, and we're going to get the money. The USDA is going to give us the money to do this. Are you insane? Are you truly insane? What government program has actually worked that way? The $15 million that the USDA has requested for this rule is to set up the program. It is to create more bureaucracy. It has nothing to do with paying for you to actually implement this program. Because $15 million isn't a drop in the bucket, and you know that. And you also know that every single time an agency comes up with a new program, they get more people, they get more employees, they get more power, and you get more regulations. And that is exactly what is going to happen here. There are 2 other countries, well, there's more than that, but there are other countries who have implemented an EID program. Denmark was the first. Did you read what happened in Denmark earlier this year? A $100 a head tax on every head of livestock in that country because of global warming. A $100 tax. They can't tax you unless they know down to the last number what you have and where they're located. Did you hear what happened in Ireland? Ireland adopted an RFID program in early 2022. By August of 2023, they were issuing a slaughter order of 41,000 head of cattle. Not because of a disease outbreak, but because of global warming. That's what this is about. So I went to the Ireland website. I went to what it would be their USDA, and I started pulling up the documents, just looking at the documents and the forms that you would have to fill out to stay in compliance with their program. The list alone of the various documents that you have to fill out in order to comply with their EID mandate, this is just a list of the documents that you have to fill out to comply with their mandate. You want to tell me that EID is easier for managing your livestock? Look at this. Here is a 28-page document, the Herd Keeper Manual, Animal Identification and Movements, Online System for Herd Keepers. This this one's 65 pages. Sorry, I misspoke. This is a 65-page document showing all of the different forms that you have to fill out in order to stay in compliance with their rules, with their EID mandate. You guys are going to have full-time compliance officers in order to comply with this mandate. Look at the paperwork. These are just the instructions of what you're going to have to fill out when the USDA implements this program. And they're estimating it's going to cost $26.1 million. That's not even going to cover the cost of the people that every single one of you are going to have to hire to comply with this rule. That is what they're doing in other countries. You don't think USDA will do the same exact thing here? In 2006, Kansas State University released a report that found that the costs of an EID-based system are significantly higher with people with smaller herds due to the expense of the electronic infrastructure. Well, that makes sense. It's a matter of being able to expense it across a bigger herd versus a smaller herd. Not surprisingly, that agency found that the large operators would pay about $2.48 a head as compared to $7.17 per head for the smaller operators. You only have to look at what happened in Michigan. In 2007, Michigan implemented mandatory electronic ID for cattle within the state. And between 2007 and 2022, Michigan lost 4,445, or 32% of its farms that have fewer than 500 head of cattle. They've destroyed their cattle industry. And they've put all the power in the hands of a few. Nationally, while the number of small farms decreased during that same time period, it was at a much lower 7%, not a full 32%. So aside from the cost, there are so many problems associated with this rule. One of them is the creation of electronic records. Again, you showed your notebook. You showed the notebook. The information about your herds is yours. That's a privacy issue. We know right now that radical environmentalists in the Biden-Harris administration want to destroy our cattle industry. We know that. We know that the radical environmentalist and the radical climate cult want to destroy our ability to raise cattle in this country. We know, they've told us, we don't even have to guess what their agenda is. Their agenda is to destroy the industry that you have created and that our forefathers have created. They want to destroy the industry that has created the jobs and that has the health benefits and all of the different things that producing cattle and eating meat provide. They want to destroy our ability to use our lands the way that we see fit. They want to destroy our ability to access federal lands and to own private property. The fact is that these electronic records are going to be subject to public view. You are funding your own demise when you go down this road, because the radical environmentalists are going to want to know how many head of cattle you own so that they can implement a rule just like they did in Ireland, and they're going to start telling you when you have to slaughter cattle because of global warming. Another problem with this is the vertical integration that I've already talked about. I know why the big producers want it. We all know why the big producers want it. They want to put you out of business. And they put you out of business, and they also can take your land. This is about private property rights. It's about independence. It's about our culture. It's about our food supply. It's about affordable food. It's about everything that has made this country as prosperous as it is. Private property rights are one of the most significant things that we have in this country that sets us apart from every other country on planet Earth. Having private property, being able to determine our own destiny, being able to hand land down from one generation to the next, being able to produce food. We know that that is what they are after, and this is just one more cog in that wheel. We don't need to manage what they're going to be doing because they've already told us. And again, when somebody is telling you that they're trying to destroy your industry, you ought to believe them. And that's what this is about, and it's why it's so incredibly important that we fight back against it. And that's why I appreciate RCAF, and I appreciate the stock growers and all of you who are willing to come here and listen to this and be willing to spread this message, and also to make sure that your legislators, your congressmen and women, are there fighting with you to block what's going on here. Since the announcement of the APHIS's intent to mandate EID ear tags, I have been leading the charge in Congress to support America's ranchers and to block this rule. My opposition has included writing numerous op-eds that describe the threat and consequences of this mandate, and I've also done countless radio and television interviews with networks across the country trying to get this message out. To stop this mandate, we really must build a coalition, and to do that, we must build awareness about the risk that this mandate poses. Legislatively, I have opposed the mandate during debates on the floor of the House of Representatives, and I have sought to block the rule numerous times through the appropriations process, including by introducing an amendment to block federal funds from being used to implement this rule. It would block the agency not from giving funds to cattle producers, but actually being able to set up the program within the USDA. And most recently, I have offered a resolution pursuant to what's called the Congressional Review Act, which would rescind this awful mandatory EID rule. This resolution is jointly sponsored in the Senate by Cynthia Lummis from Wyoming. The Congressional Review Act is an additional check on the administrative state, and it was passed in 1996, and it allows Congress to overturn agency action. Now, we're going to probably have another conference like this where we go over the entire administrative state and talk about ways in which Congress should be retaking its legislative authority, but that's a discussion for another day. What this does, what the CRA does, the Congressional Review Act, is it requires the agencies to report final rules to Congress, and then we have the opportunity to implement or to pass a resolution that would prevent the agency from being able to implement the rule. It is absolutely critical that every single one of you call your congressmen and senators and tell them to co-sponsor Representative Hageman's HJ Resolution 167. Write that down, HJ 167, and Senator Lummis's SJ Resolution 98. Mine is HJ Resolution 167, and Senator Lummis's is SJ Resolution 98. Please call your representatives and your senators, ask them to get on board with this. The fact is, we have some powerful players out there who have been fighting me every step of the way on this, including when I filed that first lawsuit in the fall of 2019. Texas Farm Bureau has been aggressive in pushing mandatory EID. Some of our other stock growers organizations have been aggressive in pushing mandatory EID. You need to let them know what you think about that, and you need to let your counterparts in those states know that their own cattle organizations are selling them out. This is absolutely urgent because this rule is scheduled to go into effect on November 15th, or on November 5th. We are truly in a David versus Goliath situation here, where the voices of millions of our cattle producers and our grassroots ranchers, are being drowned out by DC special interests, big business, the packers, ear tag manufacturing companies, and the people who will be making massive amounts of money if this mandate goes through. I really do appreciate the incredible support that you're providing here. This room is full. It's exciting to see. There's a lot of times that I've kind of felt like we were fighting this battle alone, and we're not. You all understand the significance of this. You understand why it is so important that we block this. You understand what your marching orders are. And your marching orders are that you've got to work with every single person you can think of, including your own state agencies. Our states need to start protecting us from the federal government. Our states need to be protecting us from our federal government. You need to call your governor. You need to get a hold of your Department of Ag here in South Dakota, Nebraska, North Dakota, Montana, Colorado, Wyoming, wherever you're from. You need to be talking to your political leaders within your states and saying, we're not going to put up with this, and you need to tell the USDA and APHIS that we are not going to do this. You need to start demanding that your state representatives and your state leaders get engaged with this and push back against USDA and APHIS. This is a bad idea. It is going to ultimately really have a devastating impact on our independent producers especially. It's going to have a devastating impact upon our livestock producers, on our private property rights, and on our freedom. USDA does not have the authority to require you to put an ear tag like this on your cattle or on your bison. We got to stand up. We got to fight back against this stuff. Thank you. Thank you. She's.
Mine works, I think. Harriet's going to take some questions. So if you have questions, raise your hand and we'll go back and forth that side to this side. Vaughn's first out of the gate. Thank you, Harriet.
Okay.
Why is this working?
Yes.
Okay. Why is this is an 18-month deal going interstate? Why is my veterinarian being instructed to bangs my 9-month-old calves this year with electronic EID?
So if you go to the APHIS, the question is, why is there a mixed message? This rule actually applies to cattle that's 18 months, sexually intact cattle and bison that are over 18 months old. Again, this is incrementalism. Because if you go to the APHIS website, at least as recently as a couple of weeks ago, it basically says cradle to grave. So USDA, that's the overall, the main agency, and then APHIS is a sub-agency within USDA. So USDA, the smoke and mirrors part of, really, it only applies to a very limited number of cattle. It's only 11%. It's only sexually intact cattle over 18 months of age. But APHIS is trying to push this from cradle to grave for every head of cattle and every head of bison out there. And so, and that's also, I think, that the message that they're giving to our veterinarians, that they're giving to our stock barns, our sale barns. It's intentional confusion. It is intentional confusion to try to get people to be putting these on not just the cattle that are over 18 months of age. But another point that I keep trying to make to these people is I say, how many of you people have been on a ranch? How many of you people have actually handled cattle? How many of you people have handled bulls? How many of you people have handled buffalo, for goodness sakes? Have you seen the heads on those things? I mean, how are they going to get ear tags in a bunch of 18-month-old bison? I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I'd like to watch them. I mean, it could be kind of fun. Maybe we could have a sport to watch USDA employees come out and try to ear tag bison. We don't handle our cattle at that age. You brand, you ear tag, you vaccinate, you do that when they're calves. But how often are you putting all your bulls through a corral and through a chute? How often are you handling your cows at 18 months, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old? That's what doesn't make sense about this. And the other thing is, by starting with those numbers, again, that price is going to increase as we get more cattle that meet that qualification. So this is intentional confusion on their part, and I think that the entire industry, the cattle industry, whether it's with our veterinarians, our sale barns, our Department of Ags within our state, I think that they are intentionally giving misinformation so that they can encourage people to comply with a rule that doesn't even exist.
Hello, Harriet.
Hi.
This is Kenny Fox from South Dakota. South Dakota and Wyoming each have state laws that allow us to use multiple forms of official ID. Should we be contacting our state's attorney generals to enforce that law?
Yes. That's
Thank
what
you.
I'm saying. Get a hold of your state officials. Say, our legislators passed a law protecting this industry from this federal overreach. Now, what the federal government's going to say is they're going to say preemption. My response is, this is a regulation. Congress didn't pass this law. Congress did not pass this law. But see, this is where the sale barns come in. And the sale barns, I want to give a shout out to them because the sale barns have been very supportive. But they're going to be the ones that have to enforce this, because what they're going to have to do is, let's say Harriet Hageman brings in 50 head of cattle one day and I want to sell in Nebraska and I don't have my ear tags. It's the sale barn that's going to have to turn my cattle away. They're going to force the sale barn to be the enforcers of this rule, yet the rule doesn't even have any financing available at all for them to retrofit their barns and their chutes and everything else to run the cattle through, yet they're the enforcers of this rule.
The Constitution says that anything that the federal government is doing we don't like, we can nullify it. How do we start doing it?
Well, I don't know if you're talking about the 10th Amendment. I suppose that's in part what you're talking about. Here's what I would say. Elect better people at your state level. Elect people at your state level who are willing to push back and fight back against the federal government. You need to have governors that, instead of holding out their hands for money, instead of demanding more and more federal funds for more and more programs, whether it's Department of Education, Department of Transportation, whatever the Department of Ag, whatever the department may be, we need to have governors and legislators who are willing to stand up and start demanding that they get block grants from the federal government so they can make their own determination about what kind of programs they're going to implement. We need better people elected in Congress who are actually going to push back and stop the nonsense that's coming out of these agencies. We need better presidents. But we need elected officials in our states. It's the states that are the ones that are going to have to start standing up to a lot of this, because I'll tell you, being a person who's in Congress, and I love what I do, and I'm very honored to represent the state of Wyoming, but that place is broken, and the fix is going to come from the states. Ultimately, the fix is going to come from the states. And it's not necessarily through the 10th Amendment. It's just the states standing up and having a Governor Gordon or a Governor Nome or whoever the governor is say, you're not going to implement that program in the state of South Dakota or the state of Wyoming or the state of North Dakota. In Wyoming, we manage our livestock really, really well. We don't have disease outbreaks. What we're doing is we're allowing the federal government to import beef and meat that are creating the problems. We're importing our own demise from other countries. And then turning around and saying, oh, but we have to have EID. Because they're bringing the disease in, whether it's from Brazil or China or Paraguay, wherever it might be. So start electing people who are better at representing us and hold their feet to the fire when they tell us one thing when they're campaigning, and then when they get into office, they don't do what they said they were going to do. That's the way we win this battle. But that's who nullifies it. It's the governors of our state and it's our state legislators who step up and say, no, you're not doing that in Wyoming. You're not doing that in Utah. You're not doing that in South Dakota or Montana, wherever it might be. That's where the nullification comes from. It has to be our states that protect us from the federal government. And we ought to be able to demand that our states protect us from the federal government.
Yeah, Harriet, Bill Cluck from South Dakota. I was at a meeting in 2005 on this animal ID thing, and the discussion then was on the avian influenza and how to electronically identify your farm flock chickens. I got up and asked him if it wouldn't be better if we solved the problem and vaccinated all the migratory birds that were spreading the avian influenza. It stopped the conversation. But the point is, right along with that, they were saying that the large chicken flocks or the large hog farms would be exempt from these requirements because they already had their own ID systems. I think that should be noted here.
So that is why, that's one of the reasons that I'm talking about that this rule only applies to 11% of the industry, and the reality is it is the part of the industry that probably has the least risk of a disease outbreak. So I come from a cow-calf operation near Fort Laramie, Wyoming. We very seldom have a corral full of cows. They're in the pasture. The chance of a disease outbreak when you're running a cow-calf operation or you're running yearlings is pretty slim. Where do you have the higher risk of a disease outbreak? And that's going to be in your big confined animal feeding operations, right? And I'm not attacking anybody. We need our confined animal. We need our feedlots. I'm not trying to attack anybody. But the irony of this rule is that those large feeding operations in Kansas, Texas, Iowa, Nebraska, etc., wouldn't have to comply with this rule because they would most likely never have to cross state lines for sale. So the irony of the rule is it's going to apply to the people or to the livestock that have the least chance of a disease outbreak while exempting the ones that have the higher risk. You know, they have already vertically integrated the pork industry. They've already vertically integrated the poultry industry. This is to vertically integrate the cattle industry and the bison industry. That's what this is about. And so that is one of the ironies of it. They're targeting the independents with this rule.
Over here, Representative. Representative Hageman. Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Sean Talk, southeastern Montana, just kind of out in the middle of nowhere. But right now, I can pull up on my phone exactly where my bulls are with their tag. And I think this threat goes a little bit beyond just tracking them from one state to the next. 10 years from now, what are they going to ask us to do?
It's all right here in this paperwork. And it's not 10 years down the road, it's right now. If anybody wants to come over while I'm sitting here today, you can come over and look at the documents that I've pulled. I pulled 2 of the documents, printed 2 of them out. One was 35, one was 65 pages. Those are just 2 of the documents that describe what the producers in Ireland have to fill out, the documents and the materials that have to be maintained and retained by the cattle producers in Ireland in order to stay in compliance with this rule. What you're going to see is massive, massive, massive amounts of paperwork, which if it's an electronic identification system, why do they then turn around and make you fill out all kinds of paperwork? I mean, that alone kind of gives up the gig here, doesn't it? And so it is exactly what I said. It is incrementalism. At this point, they say it's disease traceability. The next thing they're going to try to force on you is BQA compliance, beef quality assurance, the BQA, the 56-point checklist, to everything from the bottom rung on your fences having to be without barbs and 18 inches off the ground so that they're wildlife friendly, fencing off your water supply so that you're protecting the fisheries and wetlands. What they're going to force next, if this goes through and they are successful in this, is for those of you who want to be BQA compliant, again, that's your choice. I'm perfectly comfortable with that. What the USDA is going to do is try to make that mandatory, and they can only do it if they have an ear tag mandate like this.
Ron Volk, North Dakota. About a month and a half ago, we met with our Congressman Armstrong, and we brought this subject up, and he's supported your bill and he signed on it, co-sponsor of it. He made the point, he says, it's a good bill, but it'll never hit the floor. So how do you get it to a vote?
Well, not with this administration and not with the current situation that we're dealing with. So it in fact is, he's right, but the rule has not got into effect yet. And as a result, we still have time with a new administration, with a new president, to get a Congressional Review Act through. So that's why we're pushing this as hard as we are, because we need everybody, we need to keep the House, we need to retake the Senate, and we need to have the presidency, and we will have a chance of getting this blocked legislatively. And then again, I'm going to say it, we need to have our state legislators and our governor stepping up and trying to protect us from this and trying to force the USDA to back down.
So how do we do that before November 5th, which is actually Election Day, which is the date that this mandate is supposed to go into effect?
Because we will still have time after that to be able to do a Congressional Review Act. We have a certain number of days after a rule goes into effect to do a CRA, have it voted on and signed by the president to block a particular regulation. If you remember when Donald Trump first went into office, I believe because we had the House, the Senate, and the presidency, we were able to block about 20 of Obama's worst regulations that went into effect at the end of his term. So after Donald Trump was elected in November, there was a flurry of rulemaking and finalization of rules that happened in November and December of 2016, excuse me. When the newly constructed Congress, the Republican-led House, Senate, and then with the president came in January, they did a bunch of CRAs against those regulations and blocked them.
Right here in the center, Representative.
Hi, Ken Morris from Montana. I've got a question. Why did the government move that research facility, the National Bio and Agro Facility, into the middle of Kansas, off the coast of New York?
The Plum Island research facility makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. We know with what happened with the COVID-19 that viruses can escape these virology centers. We know that it can happen, that there can be lab leaks. We know that. And if you don't know exactly what he's talking about, is that there is a research facility on Plum Island off the coast of New York that is incredibly secure. Incredibly secure. To go there or to leave there, you have to go through all kinds of protocols because they are testing and studying disease outbreaks for ag issues, for agriculture products. And it's been there forever. They're moving it to the middle of Kansas. They're moving that facility to the middle of cattle country. And it's done. And it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I don't know the answer to that. I think it's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, but I don't think that government always works as efficiently as we'd like them to.
Florence Thompson from South Dakota. What would happen if the South Dakota legislature were to pass a law that our sale barns are free markets and that they will not be enforcing this kind of regulation? What could they do to us?
Well, again, the only issue is preemption. The only issue is whether they could argue that this regulation preempts state law. So I think there would probably be a lawsuit over that. The question becomes whether your governor and your legislature are going to actually enforce that and defend the law. We have it in Wyoming. Chip Nyman right over here, he's one of our legislators. He's hopefully our future Speaker of the House in Wyoming. He has put forward a law in Wyoming that we will recognize all forms of identification, back tags, ear tags, brands, et cetera, for disease traceability. So we already have that. The question becomes whether the USDA could sue you. But the other question is, and where this is going to be enforced is, again, it's going to be enforced individually against Harriet Hageman. Harriet Hageman tries to take 50 head to the sale barn in central Nebraska, and the sale barn in Nebraska says, we can't accept your cattle because they don't have an EID ear tag. That's where it's in, but South Dakota isn't going to dictate what Nebraska does. So if you pass a law in South Dakota, I could bring my cattle to South Dakota, but I couldn't bring them to Nebraska. So the reason that the 2013 rule worked really well is because it said states could not have mandatory EID. The 2013 rule not only recognized all forms of identification, it specifically prohibited states from mandating RFID ear tags. We don't have that anymore. So if I try to take my cattle to Nebraska, Nebraska could very well say, you can't sell, you're from Wyoming and you don't have EID.
Representative, over to your right.
Harriet, my name's Paul Martin. I'm from Des Moines, Iowa. While you were talking, I looked up the Federal Register on this rule, and it showed the November 5th date, but it goes back. There were, I think, 4 different comment periods back to 2017 on this issue. And during that time, as you look, there were probably around 3,500 comments total on this issue that were registered with APHIS. Industry people, equipment manufacturers making the ID tags, producers and so forth. My thought is, you look at this room, what have we got? Probably 300-400 people here. It didn't take very many people to get this pushed through. And so your comments back to Washington today are extremely important. Would you agree?
I would agree with that.
Thank you.
And when they started this in 2011, the first rulemaking for traceability, the comments and the livestock producers rose up and just said absolutely not. And that's how the 2013 rule came out the way that it did, because they recognized the industry was so opposed to a mandatory rule that they said, okay. But this is when we used to have agencies that were actually, number one, doing their job, and number two, would listen to the citizens of the country as required by the APA. We don't have that as much anymore. But at least at the time, they recognized that the industry was wholeheartedly opposed to a mandatory ear tag mandate or requirement. But you do have to engage. You have to engage with the agencies, but I'm going to come back to it again. You also need to make sure that your states are involved with this, and your state Department of Ag is issuing comments the way that you want them issued, and that your veterinarians are also listening to you, and that the other related industries that are dependent upon cattle producers are listening to what the cattle producers want. Because you should be the driver of this. The USDA should not be able to unilaterally say, we're going to impose a multi-billion-dollar mandate on this industry, ignoring what it is that the industry not only wants but needs.
On your left, Harriet.
Carla Lems, representative from District 16 in South Dakota here. Could another way to fight back against this to be for our attorney generals and or organizations or individuals to file suit under the Chevron decision?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's the Chevron decision. In other words, they can't defer. What the Chevron decision said was that the courts cannot defer to an agency's interpretation of law to implement a regulation. So that's what Chevron says. There may be some aspects of that here, but I am very confident that there will be lawsuits filed against this. What I come back to is, under what authority does the USDA have the right to impose a $2 billion tax on your industry that you are adamantly opposed to, and that they can't demonstrate that there is the need for it? Again, we have the safest, highest quality cattle and meat in the world. What they're doing and what they keep saying to me and what different advocates have said to me is, we're going to have hoof and mouth. We're going to have this. It's going to be imported in. And my response is, then what are you doing about that? Why are you talking about importing disease and then coming up with a solution that destroys our industry? Why aren't we looking at that? I don't get the best answers on that one. But yes, there are going to be lawsuits filed against this, and I'm hoping that they will prevail. But I don't think we ought to have to file suit against our government every time they go rogue. I mean, that's what we do. I'm an attorney. I practiced law for 34 years before I went into Congress. I love suing the federal government. I love suing the federal government. But that is not the way that our government is set up. This is a government of, by, and for the people. We are not serfs. We are not, we control them, they don't control us. And I mean that at every single level. And that's why we've got to be pushing back against these things, because at some point we're going to have to get this ship righted. At some point we're going to have to get back to what our government is actually supposed to be doing for us and not what we're supposed to be doing for them. We have created a bureaucracy and a leviathan back in Washington, D.C. that is mind-blowing. It is so far outside the realm of our constitutional framework. It's so far outside of what our forefathers thought. And it's so far outside of what a healthy government and economy and society is. You cannot have the government controlling every aspect of your lives, because at some point they fail. In fact, most of the time they do. We're seeing it in real time in the southeastern part of the United States. People expect the government to come in and save them. They're not going to. They aren't going to. They're not equipped to. Right now, what we've done is we've empowered them to regulate us, but not benefit us. We have empowered them to control us, but not do what we want them to do. We have empowered them to issue dictates and diktats and mandatory mandates, all different kinds of things. But then we say, hey, what about us? I'm sitting here without cell service. I'm sitting here without clean water. I'm sitting here on the side of a road with nothing left. And you've got the Vice President of the United States saying, well, if you can get to a computer, we'll send you $750 10 days down the road. And when we come to talk to you about that $750, the very first thing you need to do is make sure that you socially distance. Did you know that that's on their website? When these people come to interview you to see if you can get the $750, these people are down there in these dire situations. The first thing on the website is make sure you socially distance. For what? That's what our government has become. That is what our government has become. This is just another symptom. This is just another example of failed government, with people attempting to justify their existence and, again, substantially undermine our food industry, substantially rebuild our cattle industry and our private property rights. I mean, there are so many aspects of this rule that are interconnected in terms of our very society and the very fabric of who we are. And maybe it's why I have fought as hard as I have, because I can see where this is going on so many different levels.
Representative, one last question. I think we're going to go to one question here, and then we're going to move on.
Hi, Mitzi Hunt from South Dakota. I have a quick question, and I am wondering if our own national representatives, the 3 here in South Dakota, have signed on to your resolution.
I think so. I would have to go look. I would. I work very well with your representatives here in South Dakota. I do. And in North Dakota, somebody just mentioned Kelly Armstrong. I work very, very well with them. I'd have to go look at that. I probably should have before I came today. But our smaller states, our lesser populated states, the ones that don't have the big packing and the big facilities, we need to stick together. We do need to stick together. But again, thank you all for being here. I look forward to the discussion. I'll be here for a little bit, and I hope to have the opportunity to meet more of you. Thank you. I keep trying to get away, and I just can't.
Okay, so they want these tags. When does that tag leave the cow, and when does food security start?
I don't know. They don't know.
They don't know. Okay.
They don't
Harriet,
know.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, that was enlightening. So I'm going to bring up the 2 hosts now. I'm going to start with USCA. National cattle organizations use their membership and leadership to carry their voices to Washington. Not always do we agree on everything, but we do on this. We agree that the opposition of this mandate of the American Beef and the American Beef Labeling Act bill reinstating mandatory country of origin labeling requirements are two that we stand together on. Our next speaker, United States Cattlemen's Association, remains unwavering in its policy priority, strengthening the bottom line of the United States cattle producers. We know that your operation, to be sustainable for future generations, must first be profitable. We just learned where some of that profit is going to go. Next, I'd like to introduce the president of the United States Cattlemen's Association, Justin Tupper. He is the manager of St. Ange Livestock here in South Dakota. He has testified before Congress and comes from generations of livestock auction managers and cattle owners. Justin?
Thank you, and thank you, Representative Hageman, for taking the fight for us, and that is what it's about. First and foremost, as you look behind me and you see both of those banners, that's a proud moment for me as president of U.S. Cattlemen's, because it's been one of the things that I believe we have to do as an industry is work together and not apart. And we are, Doris said it just right, we're not always going to agree on every issue, but 90% of the time we do, and our group is small. All of us as cattle producers is small, and on these issues, we've got to make sure that we work together. So I think as you look at those two banners up there and the discussions we're going to have today, it's very important that we stand in unison and work together on these issues, because it's not going to go away. Even if the bill that Representative Hageman has put up, if we get that passed, the ID issue is not going away tomorrow, or even if we pass that bill. We're going to continue to have to work on it. So I think that's huge. First and foremost, I just want to say it has been my honor to serve as U.S. Cattlemen's president, represent producers all across the country. I want to introduce, I have one of our board members, and maybe he gets the award for coming the furthest away. He just had a big rally. One of our board members, Jack Payne from Nevada, is here. Thank you, Jack, for being here so a long ways, and he just had a big rally at his barn. I have several other board members here, and we won't take time to go through all those, but we appreciate all of you being here. I think the opportunity for us to move this forward and make sure that our voices are heard is said loud and clear in this room. And I think very much so, the statement that we're going to stand up and take a stand and say, this is not going to work for us. I'm going to talk a little bit about the current rule and how it works. And everything Harriet Hageman said, I agree with. The 2013 rule left provisions that were good, but it also left some things that are really silly, and I'm going to point a few of those out. And that's why we got to continue to talk. In the current rule, they have to ID any intact male or female that's moving in and out of state. And that goes to all the cull cows. And at St. Ange, we're right in the corner of the state, so we get a lot of cattle out of Montana, North Dakota, Wyoming. If any of those producers bring us a cow that goes to feed in South Dakota, after the sale, we have to run them through and we have to ID them. And we have to make that written, and the vet has to send it in. And they go on the same truck that if you send me a cow from South Dakota, does not get ID'd, and it goes in the same pen, and they go down there and they get fed. It makes absolutely no sense. So I took one of those tags, and about 2 months later, I called into our state office, which in South Dakota, we have a pretty good state office. They work pretty hard to make sure. I said, well, where is this cow? Well, we don't know. We don't have a database for that. We don't, So I said, why are we doing it? What are we doing? Why do we ID all of these cows after the sale? And the vet has to have crew, and we have injuries to the cows. I mean, it makes no sense. So not only, and I agree 100%, the 2013 rule did some good things and left us provisions that allow us to move freely. It has some things in it that we need to, if we get to open the book, that we need to work on. I think you know, as the new rule, would just change that little bangs tag or metal clip to that EID tag, which doesn't seem like much, and Harriet very much brought up the points of why it will not work. And in the sale barns, not only do I get to represent U.S. Cattlemen's as president, but sale barns, it is going to be a huge problem for us at any point in time as they continue to push it to cattle that are not just intact or breeding animals that move across state lines. It's something that we absolutely cannot do. We have trouble, like every one of you, trying to get enough people to come to work on sale day to make sure that we can get the cattle moved through in a timely fashion, let alone having to run them all through and do something again. So that's a huge, huge problem that we have. A lot of the pushback that I've heard from other organizations is, well, all we're doing is changing it, making it more efficient. There's no way that they have any proof that using this electronic tag is more efficient than what we currently do. And that's one of the questions we have to throw back at them right away is say, how can you tell us it's more efficient? I already can tell you that it won't be, because all of the different systems, and there is no infrastructure in place to gather that data. So that is going to be a big thing that we have to use as a tool to make sure that they don't work against us. The problem with the electronic ID in the forms that we have to do it, it's the same thing basically as the metal clip. It doesn't do anything more. We still basically have to catch their head because it's a low frequency tag, so you have to be very close to the tag to read it. Then you have to have something that puts it to a computer, and anybody that runs computers knows this is the first time that you want to use them to make sure they work and it's going to be more efficient, then they don't work. Or Verizon has an outage like they did the other day and nobody has phones. And so now we depend on these systems that all of a sudden are not going to work. I totally agree with Representative Hageman on who's going to get the brunt of this tag system, and it is the auction barns. And I want to add to what she said about they're trying to take away competition, and that's the biggest thing. Competition is what makes our industry go around, and I'm talking about it from the ground up. And we already see the big four packers, they do everything within their power to make sure that they don't have to compete for cattle, and this would be another way. All the tag cattle would be on those big feedlots, and they don't have to go to any of the small producers or the small feedlots to buy them because they get all they need from those big corporate feed yards. So I think at the center of all of this is the fight against competition. And, you know, in our world, in the sale barn business, competition is what it should be. If you don't like the way I do it at my barn, you can drive 30 miles down the road, or in my case, 10 miles down the road and sell it at another barn. And that's what makes it and drives our prices and makes sure that our industry stays strong is we have competition. And as this corporate world and we integrate all this stuff, they try to drive out competition. One of the last points I want to make is when they talk about who's going to hold the data, that really is the most important thing. When this data and this information is in the hands of the wrong people, it could be used for numerous things that do not fit or go against all of the abilities of us to do our jobs and work and do it the way we want to. You know, you think about if the USDA has it, how would that be? And who would have access to it? Well, we go to Congress and we've been to USDA and talked about the price discovery and what we need to do. The first thing they say to us, that's confidential. That's confidential information the big four packers have. If they're bidding, that's confidentiality. It's a rule. Well, let's toss it back in their face. This is confidential, and you should not be able to have it. And I think that's something we have to make sure we get known, because they've used it against us. So we got to make sure we use it against them. I think when we look at the way this rule and what's going to happen and the good questions about how do we stop it, one, no matter what happens, we've got to stand up and at least be heard, and so the USDA knows we are not going to lightly take them with a stroke of a pen, decide how we're going to move our cattle from one place to the other. And no matter what happens, that's got to be very important. And I do think that we have to know that winning in this bill is huge, but it is not the end of the fight. So I think being able to come to one of these rallies, whatever they may be, and when we as producers work together on a common goal, we can get things done. So I very much appreciate that. Doris, I'm going to get you to our next speaker. Thank you, Representative Hageman. Thank you all for being here, and we're going to continue to work to make sure this does not impede our lives. Thank you.
Okay, so it's been brought up Iowa's here, and Nevada. Do I have North Dakota? Make some noise. Okay, Nebraska. Wyoming. Colorado. Montana. Anybody else? Ohio. All righty. Thank you guys for making the trek. Well, South Dakota, yeah. Yeah. So I have just been noticed that none of South Dakota's delegates has signed on to Harriet's Bill 167. If I am incorrect, please tell me by the end of this. Our next speaker, the Ranchers Cattlemen's Action Legal Fund of United Stock Growers of America is a mouthful, otherwise known as RCAF USA, is the largest trade association that exclusively represents the United States cattle farmers and ranchers with multi-segmented beef supply chain. Members reside in 44 states and include cow-calf operators, cattle backgrounders, stockers, feedlot owners, and as well sheep producers. I'd like to introduce Bill Bullard, CEO of RCAF USA. Hailing from South Dakota, formerly a cow-calf producer himself, has a Bachelor of Science in Political Science, and has testified on behalf of RCAF USA before Congress and has managed numerous lawsuits on behalf of his organization. He's also authored an antitrust paper published by the South Dakota Law Review. Bill currently resides in Montana. Bill Bullard, please.
Congresswoman Harriet Hageman says there's likely to be litigation against this rule. There shouldn't have to be, but there's likely to be. Congresswoman Harriet Hageman worked for the New Civil Liberties Alliance prior to becoming the sole Congresswoman of Wyoming. In that organization, that's where she filed the lawsuit against the Secretary of Agriculture for overreaching, for attempting to mandate RFID by 2023. So we went back to the New Civil Liberties Alliance upon the issuance of this new rule, and we talked to the young lady, Kara Rollins, who worked hand in hand with Congresswoman Harriet Hageman. And Kara Rollins, standing over there, she and the South Dakota Stock Growers Association and RCAF USA and Kenny and Roxy Fox and Don and Tracy Hunt and Rick and Teresa Fox will be soon filing a lawsuit against this unreasonable rule. So, and I'm not sure what soon means. It means soon. It means perhaps next week. In the meantime, Congresswoman Harriet Hageman talked to you about what changed in 2010 to bring about this unwieldy rule. And do you remember what happened then? If you remember, in 2009, the USDA conducted listening sessions about a program that they called the National Animal Identification System, NACE. And that was the program that was to require animals, all species, to be ear tagged from birth to plate. Fortunately for us, they had difficulty determining how to ear tag a chicken, even though they wanted to do so. But in 2009, they held a listening session in Rapid City, South Dakota. Do you know how many people showed up? about as many as there are here today. You cannot underestimate the importance of you being here today. There are 8, 9 states represented here. You're the grassroots producers that the U.S. Department of Agriculture is supposed to be helping to sustain an independent U.S. cattle industry here in the United States of America, and they've got it wrong. And you're here to tell them so. And you did in 2009. And that's why the winds changed. That's why in 2010, the USDA began to actually listen to what you were asking for. And chief among what you were asking for was flexibility. The ability to decide on your own how to manage your cattle, how to manage your operations, what identification device you needed to use in order to help accomplish the goal of the United States Department of Agriculture, because we agreed with the rule. We do need the ability to trace back diseases, and we had it. And in 2013, in a negotiated compromise with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, we had a workable rule. But as Congresswoman Harriet Hageman described, there are forces in Washington, D.C. that are working to influence the government in order to control you, and that is why we're here today. So Congresswoman Harriet Hageman talked about what happened after you showed up in 2009 in force, en masse, and demonstrated widespread opposition. You know, today it's not just the 400 or 500 people in this room. There are 2 networks. You've got Cattle USA and you've got DV Auctions are live streaming this event. That means there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of producers. They all need to hear this message because we need all of their help in order to pass Congresswoman Hageman's House Resolution 167. We have to get that done. That is the only way we will actually stop the implementation of this final rule before November 5th of 2024. And that is because the lawsuit that will be filed it's a very comprehensive complaint. It is alleging that the U.S. Department of Agriculture has violated your constitutional rights. It is alleging that the U.S. Department of Agriculture has overreached and violated its own rules under the Administrative Procedure Act. And it will argue that there's no connection between what the government is trying to impose upon you and the objective that they purport they will achieve. They purport to achieve an improved ability to trace back a diseased animal. But the only requirement in this rule is an imposition on you. You are the only one in the supply chain that's required to do anything. And you're the one that's going to have to incur an untenable cost, particularly if you're a small to medium-sized producer. It's because the rule is ineffective, ineffectual in accomplishing the government's objective unless they write another rule. They have to require that the chip in your cow's ear that's likely coming from China, that Chinese chip, they're going to have to require that it be read somewhere. This rule doesn't require it. It doesn't require you or anyone else to own a wand. It doesn't require you or anyone else to have a software system in your computer. All it requires to do is requires you to expend the cost, $20-some billion or $1 million, in order to affix an electronic ear tag in your cow's ear. This rule will not accomplish what the government is trying to achieve. Therefore, the rule is arbitrary and capricious, and that's why that's one of the allegations that we'll make in the lawsuit. There will be a lawsuit. What you are doing here today will have a tremendous impact, and you need to follow the advice of Congresswoman Hageman. You need to call every local, state, and national official in your state, urging them to get behind you and help preserve your freedoms and your liberty and your independence by stopping the U.S. Department of Agriculture's onerous and bad rule. I had another word, but this is being live streamed, so we had to be careful. So what I'd like to do is talk briefly about what brought us up to the 2009 listening session in which over 400 people showed up in South Dakota and caused the USDA to change course. And it happened back in 2003. It was May of 2003. A Canadian cow had been imported in the United States and was detected with bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or BSE, mad cow disease. It was detected in Mabton, Washington. As a result of the United States' stringent import requirements, our border was closed to Canadian beef and cattle. Our regulations required the closure of the border to any country where BSE was known to exist. It was now known to exist in Canada. But soon after the border was closed, the USDA, in its infinite wisdom, and because of its being influenced by multinational corporations, decided to allow certain beef products into the United States in contradiction to USDA rules. RCAP USA filed a lawsuit. We won a preliminary injunction. We closed that border that was closed in May of 2003 until July of 2025. Recall what your prices did back then? But in any event, we had joined the World Trade Organization in 1995, put us under the umbrella of the World Organization for Animal Health. The World Organization for Animal Health had been dealing with BSE outbreaks in the European Union for many years, since the mid-'80s, and they had decided to begin pressuring nations, including the United States that joined in '95, to implement a government regime for animal disease traceability, animal identification. That was the impetus of the effort by USDA to implement to propose the National Animal Identification System, the NACE program. Again, that was every species, and it was requirement from birth to death. Well, in the process, we all fought back. We did, and other organizations across the United States. And they wrote proposal after proposal and voluminous documents, business plans of how they were going to implement and force you to comply with this very comprehensive National Animal Identification System so that the USDA could go back to the World Organization for Animal Health and say, we did just what Australia did. And the Australia producers, remember what they told us? We invited the Australians over about that time to one of our conventions. You know what he told us? Fight mandatory ID to the last cowboy. It's because of all the problems and expenses the Australian Beef Association members have been going through with their country. We're the United States of America. Why are we following Australia or Canada or any one of the other countries that looks to us? Why are we looking to them? We have a disease traceability system in the United States, second to none. And you have the flexibility to continue doing what we need to do in order to stop that. So the USDA was beholden to the World Organization for Animal Health. So they wanted to follow suit and implement in their country, the United States of America, a comprehensive animal identification system. That started actually in 2004. And it's been building ever since. And then we hit 2009. In 2009, 400 of you came here to Rapid City to participate in the listening session, and you made it clear as a bell. Unambiguously, you told USDA, not in America. And USDA listened at the time, and that's why they came forward. And then we had the continued influence of corporate America, primarily the multinational corporations and the ear tag companies continuing to pressure USDA. And eventually, USDA began to listen again, not to you, but to the handful of corporate interests. And that's why Congresswoman Hageman filed the lawsuit in 2019. It's because they even had a logo, a motto. It was RFID by 2023. And that's why we had the January 1 of 2023 date. Not only in the fact sheet that the Congresswoman talked about, but also in the notice that followed the fact sheet. But there continued to be pushback from you, the people. And as a result, we wound up with the 2013 rule that was workable, and now we're right back at it again. Do not underestimate the importance of your attendance at this event today. You will make the difference. And we don't have all the eggs in one basket. We must push Congress to overturn this rule with Harriet's Resolution 167 and the Senate version 98. And we have a petition that we're circulating here Not a legal petition. The purpose of this petition is to demonstrate widespread opposition against the USDA's onerous rule. You can also sign the petition online. You can go to our website, r-calfusa.com, and perhaps by the time this event is over, you can just type in on your web browser, stopmandatoryEID.com, and you can sign the petition, but you can do it today. Thank you for being here today. When you leave, call your representatives. Call all of your state officials. Call your national delegation. Urge them to sign on to those 2 resolutions. It's in our hands. No one else is going to stop this but us, and we will. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I'd also like to recognize the president of RCAF USA. He hails from South Dakota, Brett Kenzie. Please wave. Thank you. Again, I'm going to encourage you. We have booths for both of these national organizations. If you're not a member, consider it, please. Moving right along, our next speaker arguably has one of the most prominent voices in the cattle marketing business, has a significant following of beef producers throughout the Midwest. Corbett Wall is a 4th-generation cattleman and shares commentary on current livestock markets on National Beef Wire. He is the commercial cattle manager and livestock market analyst for DV Auctions. He has earned his reputation for keen understanding of the ever-evolving dynamics of the livestock marketing industry. May I present Corbett Wall.
Thank you very much. You know, we're a small group of people. You think this is a pretty impressive turnout here, and I'm glad we had such a good turnout. But as a group, we're so small. You figure less than 2% of America's population is directly involved in production agriculture. And that's been well advertised. So cattle production's for sure less than half of that. So we're less than 1% of the population, feeding not only this country, but a big portion of the world. But our voice is so small, and we're getting tired of getting pushed around all the time. But it's easy to push around whenever we don't have a big enough voice. And we strive to try to get representatives to pay attention to us and get our voice in Washington, D.C. And you guys have been on these fly-ins. It seems like they kind of like to take a picture standing next to somebody with a cowboy hat, right? They're all about that, but they don't ever carry on. How impressive was Representative Harriet Hageman? Let's hear it for her. How impressive. I was blown away. I was blown away. How ironic is it that it takes an impressive lady like that that has balls enough to fight back against this government overreach? And I'm just a unpolitically correct market analyst, and I strive for that every day. But you know, I'm humbled by the following that I have. And all I ever wanted to do was report the market and tell people what their cattle are worth. These big outfits don't want you to know. How did they kill the hog industry? They killed market transparency. You couldn't find out what one was worth. They don't really want you to know what one's worth. I'm here representing a big contingency of sale barns that I work closely with at DV Auction, which we're broadcasting on DV Auction right now, and Cattle USA, and we're with we're working together, much like these two groups are working together. We're not in competition. We're for the same thing. My friend John Campbell, that works with Winter Livestock and Cattle USA. You know, he's totally against this mandatory rule. My friend Jackie Moore, that owns and operates the biggest stockyard in the nation, he called me yesterday. He said, you got to fight this deal. But who's here and who's not here? We've got U.S. Cattlemen's Association here, who I'm fairly active with and support. Got a big contingency. And then, of course, you got RCAF here. Who's not here? Who's not here? Who's that? The National Corporate Beef Association? I use that term of endearment towards them. And where's LMA? Exactly. Where's LMA? I'm here representing a large contingency of sale barns. I report the market, I pull market information from over 250 sale barns that broadcast over the internet. And we've had sale barn operators here. You know, I thought there was a trade association that spoke for livestock markets. Why aren't they here? There's more to it, guys, than selling insurance and putting on auctioneer contests. Amen. You need to be here. There's not a sale barn in this country that wants this. It's always the sale barn's owners to have to enforce things. It's like the dollar a head checkoff. Who collects most of that? Brand inspectors and sale barns have to collect it. Do they get paid to collect it? No. If they make a mistake in their collection, they could be penalized. Is that right? And you know, if you've got cattle and you've got a note on them somewhere, and they're writing you a check, and they should put the bank's name on that, they have to look that up and find that out. Why should the sale barns have to do all this? And it's just ridiculous that they make them do those type of things. I'm going to tell you how I got started with this mandatory EID deal. Somebody tipped me off about it. It's been about a year ago. Somebody tipped me off and said, have you looked at this? And they kind of described what was going on, and I said, God, is that for real? I can't believe that. And then I saw that the National Corporate Beef Association was going to have a vote on policy to support this at Orlando at their big convention. And all of these groups, what they do is they vote on policy, and then they try to drive the policy. So they were going to have a vote on supporting this. And so all I did on my little YouTube channel is I said that this was going to happen. Woo, wow. I started getting emails and texts and phone calls from heavy hitters. I mean, big guys. And they're saying, is this true? They're going to support this? This is a joke. And I said, call your guy, you know. All of the state associations. And most of the state associations, Missouri Cattlemen's Association, Alabama, you know, all those states out there, they're all affiliates of NCBA. That's how they can say that they have so many members. But real members, I think there's more represented by these two outfits than the other ones. I mean, it's great. It's more of a social thing, especially when you get back east to be a member of that association. And most of the associations don't agree with NCBA. I call it the deep state of the cattle industry. Seems like what it is to me. It's really, really ridiculous. It's establishment cattle and beef. And I think that's likely why LMA's not here. They don't want to have to butt heads with them. But you have to be an organization that wants to get something done. But I started telling people that this was coming down the line because I could see what a train wreck it was. And I probably wouldn't be as far against it as I am if it was just going to be on the breeding stock, which is absolutely ridiculous. But you all know that it's coming down the line that it's going to be all classes of cattle from birth to slaughter. They started out with dairy cattle. Nobody raised much of a fit. You know, you're talking about a dairy industry that's completely compensated by the government, what are they going to say? They're not going to say a whole lot, so they did it on the dairy. Oh, let's wait a little while. Okay, now let's cram it down your throat on these, on their breeding stock, intact breeders. And then they're going to come down, and on the all classes, it's impossible. It's just totally impossible. And like Harriet said earlier, they don't understand what it takes to do it. And you people understand what that is. The sale barns understand what it is. You know, Jackie Moore called me whenever he got wind of this deal, and he says, you mean every calf or yearling I sell would have to be, if they do it on all classes, every one of them would have to be tagged if they didn't already have some type of a program where they were tagging their stock? And I said, yeah. And he said, I won't do it. He said, I don't have the help to do it. I don't have the room to do it. I don't have the time to do it, and I ain't going to do it. I said, I don't blame you. It was a little less than a year ago, and I was talking to him about this, and he had just had the biggest run through the ring that he had ever had. He'd had 15,000 cattle through the ring. The day before, they didn't have over 2,500 in. All those cattle come in that morning. It's impossible. You can't do it. And he said, I know my producers. He said, these were put together loads of cattle. They're just commodity cattle. He said they were thrown together 1, 2, 3 at a time. And then they were turned out on fescue. That's the kind of cattle that they handle down there. Nothing wrong with them. But he said, when those cattle come back in, he said, do you know how many of them I would have had to have tagged that weren't in some type of a tagging program before that? And I started to say maybe 30%. He said, every son of a bitch. Every one of them. It's impossible. You can't do it. And I'm glad that you people showed up for this. And I'm glad that Harriet is fighting this. And I'm coming away from this meeting feeling like we've got something going here. And I hope you guys feel that way too. And I'm glad you guys asked me to come speak unpolitically correct to you. Thank you very much, Doris. Sure. Yeah, we'll take a few questions. We'll take a few questions if anybody has one. I see some people.
Are we on? There we go.
There you go.
So I don't have a question, but I got a statement to make to you and everybody in here. And I learned this a number of years ago. And you're either at the table or you're on the menu.
That's right. Well said.
Alan Lund from North Dakota. Same way, I kind of got a little comment, not a question, but so the USDA is coming about this, and they're trying to do us a favor, is what they're saying, to ID our livestock in case of a disease outbreak, and also they want to kind of chip in and help us buy these tags. And it reminds me of a comment that was made by President Ronald Reagan. Is the scariest thing you're going to hear in your life is I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Exactly. But like John Campbell said and what Harriet said, they're not going to come out and help you do it. The only people that are in favor of this are not going to actively be doing it. It's exactly the same. But, you know, it's rally season. I hope you guys like my shirt. I got it last weekend at the big Trump rally that I had with Jack Payne in northern Nevada. We raised a lot of money, and guys, we've got a month. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but if we don't get Trump in there, you see what the other side's wanting to do. They're wanting to put restrictions on red meat intake. Can you imagine that? Of course, she's a big supporter and a sponsor of the Green New Deal. Have you seen what that's going to do to the cattle industry? We've got to do it, and I know you folks will vote the right way and support President Trump, but we've got to get him back in there or we're doomed.
On your left here, Corbett.
Yes.
I'm George Till, but this boils down to what they've been trying to do for years, eliminate the sale barns.
Yes.
And are they still going to tack to these cattle?
I didn't hear the last point.
Are they still going to tack to these cattle?
I don't know. Like we said, we support all forms of identification that you choose to use, but why do we need a mandatory?
What I mean, like when they bangs them, are they still going to tack to them because these plastic tags fall out? They're only
Right.
60% retention rate.
I would assume we would. They're still going to tattoo them, we think. Out in this country, you guys have the brand laws, and you have to brand your cattle. And half the state, which makes no sense. But anyway, I grew up in a brand state, and as much as we cuss the brand inspectors, they do a pretty good job of tracking the movement of cattle, don't they? And whenever there is a disease outbreak or something like that, you can zero in on it pretty fast. But I don't think, it just scares me, the technology that's not there yet, what they can do with that technology. We're talking carbon credits. That's going to be a big deal. You don't think they're going to use the tracking of these cattle to track carbon credits? My gosh, absolutely they will. And it's a big deal about taxes too. Whether it's personal property tax or whether it's taxing on public lands or whatever it is, they are going to use this information. And it's absolutely not right. We got any questions?
Yeah, this is a question to Justin. He said if guys bring cows in and the auction markets have to tag them, then they go to feed. Down the road, if those cows lose a tag, who's going to stand for that? Because you're going to have a tag in there to get them marketed, right? I've used these tags, and I find them on the ground all the time.
Yeah. Well, they're not as streamlined as the metal tags, but are they still going to put the metal tags in? I'm sure they'll go back to the metal tags and make sure that they have those.
Back here in the back, Corbett.
Yes, sir.
Larry Nelson from South Dakota. I listen to your report 2 or 3 times a week. I really enjoy it.
I put it out 5,
This is kind of a different question, but this new plant, processing plant that's going up in Nebraska that Walmart is partnered in. I understand that 44 Farms is tied up with that too, and that they're going to process beef on dairy cattle, so it's going to go through there. So what do you know about that? Is that true, or is that just a rumor?
I think they will be slaughtering a high percentage of beef on dairy cattle. Of course, the biggest feed yard in the country, I guess, is Black Shirt Feeders that's going to be going up in western Nebraska. They are going to be feeding primarily beef on dairy. And I don't necessarily look at Walmart being involved in that as a bad thing. If we're going to get a sizable slaughter plant that's going to compete with the big 4, they've got to have a ready-made customer. Because you think that those packers are rough on the cattle end of the plant, trying to stop competition and just kind of using their ways like the mafia. It's worse on the other end. But if you've got a huge customer that's got some skin in the game, and they're part of it, and they're not a controlling part of it. People are always saying they have a controlling interest in it. They don't have a controlling interest, but they do have an interest in it. They will take what cattle are there, and they're going to be killing primarily program cattle. But the guy told me that started it. He says, if every single head that we can slaughter in that plant in a year, if every one of them hits all the marks for Walmart's top beef, which is what they're wanting, he said if every one of them hit that and Walmart took every one of them, it wouldn't satisfy 20% of their needs. That's how big they are. So, in the beef on dairy deal, You know, we had those cattle before. They just weren't as desirable. You know, they were those giant Holstein steers, and then they were primarily just slaughtered in 2 big plants in the upper Midwest. But now they've added a lot of value to them. They've brought competition to us. And I think the only thing that's really hurting our beef cattle is they're just pushing them through the system so much faster than what they were. You know, those milk cows were having calves every year anyway. But they're just pushing them through so much faster. But I don't necessarily see it as a bad deal.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment on what you said about Trump. You know, he's the male chauvinist, and I've got into quite some discussion with women that say, I ain't voting for him, he's a male chauvinist. And my father-in-law, my wife sitting right here, he was a male chauvinist, but he knew how to make money, and that's the way Trump is.
Yeah.
You know, he's a successful businessman. He knows how to make money. What is this, like he says, how do you pronounce her name? Carmel or Carmen or whatever? Has she had any business besides taking government money?
She's never signed the front of a check, only the back.
Yeah, always, yeah. I mean, women got to wake up, you know?
You know, as much as I admire President Trump, and I'm a huge Trumpster, he's probably an asshole. That's okay. Nice guys finish last.
Way in the back here, I got one, and then I'm behind you. Sorry, Brett.
Oh, okay, way back there.
And mine is also not really a question, but I'm Julie Trask. I'm a veterinarian here in western South Dakota. And to answer the question over there about will they be requiring the tattoos still, at least in western South Dakota, I'm aware that they will be. But I've been contacted by USDA, starting with the gal that I've always been contacted by in Pierre, to get me premise registered and signed up for free EID tags. And I told her right off the bat, no, hell no, I would never do that, Anna. And I can't believe that you're even asking me to do that. This is private information. This was between me, my client, and the state. And I think that they are planning on using the veterinarians as the first minions to cave with the free EID tags. And everybody, I would encourage you to tell your veterinarian, even though they're saying, no, the veterinarian premise registers, it's only their information, but we all know the next wave is, I will be giving my client's premise registration to the state. That's the next thing. And so, you know, I have declined every time. Now I've been getting calls once a week from a new gal at USDA to get me signed up for them. So it's I was at the Freedom Rally back in 2009. It's all the same, and the agenda is all the same. And they intend to, if it's free for the first 2-3 years, eventually all the costs will be borne by the producers, and it's a giant headache. Thank you.
Brett, you got another one?
Yep, one more.
Corbett?
Yes, sir.
J.T. Rickenbach, southwestern South Dakota.
Glad you're here.
I listen to you maybe 5 times a week.
Awesome.
Not all the time. Don't quote me on that,
Yeah,
but
right.
yeah. So I've seen you on your show. One thing that was kind of touched on, and I've got a question for you if you know, on the tags. Now the tags are supposed to be made in the United States. These RFID tags are supposed to be made in the United States. But where's the chip being made?
Right.
Because I was a essential worker on me and my dad's outfit, and my brother, and I remember a lot of Ford pickups because that could not be sold because the chips were coming out of China.
They had them stacked up at racetracks and places, yeah.
Well, I'm also in the electronics business, and the only RFID foundries, and that's what you call the plant, the only RFID foundries are in China that I know of.
Wow.
And nobody, I have been trying to figure out where the heck they're going to get these chips from. And that, about 3 years ago, boy, you can't get that information. They won't tell you. And I'm in the electronics business, and I can't find anything that's not made in China. And what happens when the boats don't come over? Now, if I have to mark my cattle, I can go out into the weeds and I can find myself some old wagon iron, and I can put an X and I can put an L together, and I can mark my cattle, I can market my cattle right now. But if I have to, you could give me 100 years if I'd lived that long, and I cannot build you an RFID chip. And I know how they're built, but I don't have the equipment to be able to build stuff like that. I'm stuck. I can't sell my cattle. In our 125-year-old place, we're kind of out of luck because that's about all we can do. We can't grow corn. We can't fabricate meat. The way we fabricate meat is we run cows and calves. That's it.
Right.
So if anybody knows, I'd like to know where these chips are going to come from, because I can't tell you.
Right. Well, I appreciate all the comments and questions. I just want to reiterate that every time an issue comes down the pike and I decide what position I'm going to hold on it, I just ask myself, is this going to help or hurt small producers? Undoubtedly, it's going to force more out, and I mean, we're losing them every day. There's hundreds less small producers now than there was when we started this rally. But you get, and I've spent a lot of my time in the lower Midwest and Missouri and places like that. You know, there's not a lot of big ranches out there. You still have people that want to be involved in the cattle business, and they've got every right to be involved in the cattle business. And they're not doing it for money no more than you guys are. There's better ways in this world to get rich. We do it because we love it. And that's the reason that they do it. And they don't have a ranch. They've got little leased places scattered all around. They've got a wore-out pickup and a rusty steel 20-foot gooseneck and maybe 6 panels that are all bent up. That's their facilities. It's going to push them out. We've pushed them and pushed them and pushed them until we've pushed them out. And it's going to limit opportunities for marketing and options for marketing. What do you think is going to happen whenever a guy's worked all year and he's put together a couple loads of yearlings and he wants to sell those yearlings, and they come from 78 different homes, and none of them have an RFID tag in them, and he gets ready to sell those? Well, he's going to call the sale barn. Have they been tagged? No. Well, I'm going to have to put a tag in them, which we told you is impossible. What's that going to cost? Oh, probably $7 or $8 to put them through the chute, and then whatever the tag costs. That might be all he was going to make on the cattle. Lots of times. But then, so he gets off the phone, he's trying to decide what to do, and about that time he gets a corporate feeder or somebody that works for one of the corporate feeders, says, hey, I'll give you $5, $100 back on them yearlings. Just send the tags with the truck. We'll take care of it right here. They're wanting to eliminate competition and eliminate your options for marketing your cattle. Thank you guys for listening.
Corbett, tell them where they can find you. I had a few people ask me.
Oh, well, you can get on YouTube and look out Feeder Flash or go to nationalbeefwire.com. And I'm on both of those places. Thanks, Brett.
Thank you, Corbett, for sharing your perspective. Following lunch today, we're going to invite everybody over to the South Dakota Stock Growers 133rd Annual Convention. It is over in Conference Room 2. It's free and open to the public, and Corbett has agreed to speak again for us. So please join us after this is all concluded. The next two gentlemen that I'm going to visit with you about here is on our state level. Representative, our first one is South Dakota Representative Marty Overweg, District 19. He was the prime sponsor of the 2022 HB 1096. And I'm going to have him come up and visit why he did it, and if this mandate goes into effect, what's it going to do to that South Dakota state law?
No, I like to walk. Thank you, everyone. I've been looking forward to this. One of my favorite groups to work with, and Peter, and I'm not lying, is you guys. Why, I don't know, except you have common sense. And I'm telling you, there ain't much common sense in this state anymore. So in 2022, a young fellow by the name of Kenny Fox called me up and said, hey, are you watching this, what this guy over in Wyoming's doing? And I looked it up, and I want to thank the good representative from Wyoming who created what 1096 really was. I didn't do much work except copy what he had. And I got pretty excited about it. And then all of a sudden, I got to peer with it and started introducing it around, and wow, there wasn't much interest, was there? I got fought on every level. South Dakota State vet fought me. Certain organizations in the cattle business really fought me. And I got a little downhearted, and I knew for a fact that the only way this bill was going to get passed and through into a law was if I passed it what we call veto proof. It had to be veto proof. So I ended up throwing the money out, and I'm going to let the good representative of Wyoming speak more about the bill because it's actually his bill. But that's the biggest difference between the Wyoming law and the South Dakota law is we took the money out of this one, which just said the state wouldn't be allowed to spend any money. It was a real heartache for a lot of legislators, so we went that way. What does it mean? If this federal, I don't know, what do you want to call this? This really isn't a federal law. It's a rule. And I think right now with the United States Supreme Court that we have, I think they've spoke loud and clear that states have rights. So what does that mean? It means we have to challenge those rights. I served for 2 years as chairman of the South Dakota Ag and Natural Resources Committee, and I've served 2 years as a vice chair. I cannot tell you how many times I have to listen to comments, testimony by people who have never had their arm up the business side of a cow. And I'd like to print shirts that say, if you haven't, sit down and be still. I'm a feed consultant, and I feed a lot of your guys' cattle on the east side of the state. But I also have customers, Edgemont, all the way to Minnesota. The one thing that I've learned in the 60 years I've been on this earth, and I've never done anything else. I'm third generation in my business. We are so diverse from one end of the state to the other. You cannot throw a rope over all of us and say, this rule fits you. Where I come from, you can drive by your 120-acre pasture and check your cows on the way to the feed store for coffee and see every one of them. You got cattle out west. You're lucky if you see them the whole season they're out there. This rule is not going to work, but more importantly, it's not needed. Let's get one thing straight right here before we leave today. This is simply about control. One of the first speakers said something about the carbon pipeline. Yes, the carbon. They want to know. In my 60 years growing up in this business, I first watched them take chickens when I was this big. Farmers and ranchers would bring their eggs in and trade in my grandpa's grocery store, trade the eggs for groceries. Corporate took them. The next thing they took was the hogs. We all know how that happened. I was working with Cargill when they drove the market down to 7 cents and then wondered why the producers couldn't make a living. And look where the hogs are today. Look at the dairies. Do you think anybody in the dairy business today gives two hoots what the price of milk is on the farm? They're all connected with their production dairies. They're selling in the store. Their profits are made when they're selling to consumers. And now let me tell you one other thing if you haven't known it. They have control of the fat cattle market. When you come to my side of the state and you see all the captive, controlled, and fed cattle, they've got it. So what don't they have? What we've said for years. They don't have the cows. Why? Stock cows are a lot of work. You can't just phone that in and be successful. So how do they get it? It was mentioned here earlier, I think, by the Congresswoman, said the surf. If we let the carbon come in, and if you sit here in this room and in any way say your cow's nursing that calf, grazing on that pasture, has anything to do with hurting our environment, you're crazy, because you're admitting, don't take their money. Don't take it. You have got to stand up as producers and tell these people, my cows are not hurting. When we do, who in here, raise your hand if you could handle a $400 a year carbon tax on your cows? Nobody. What would happen? Cargill, companies like that would come in and say, well, you know what? We'll buy your cows from you and we'll pay the tax, and you just calve them and raise them to 700-800 pounds, and then we'll take care of them. This is what's going to happen if we do not stand up and say no. So I'll bring it to a state level. What do we need? What do I like to see you guys do? Vote, run first, run, and then vote for people who care about this. Don't just stand on the sideline and think somebody from Sioux Falls is going to give two hoots about what happens to your cow herd, because most of them don't. There's 105 legislators in South Dakota, and I was trying to sit there and count, and maybe the other legislators could help me, but I think there's about 17 of us out of the 70 in the House that have anything to do with agriculture. And it's our number one industry, and I believe, I might have this wrong, but I believe cows are number one of the number one industry. This is horrible, what's going to happen if we let it. Make sure that we stand tall and we vote for people and put people in that will help us and know what they're talking about and protect our industry. It's been great talking to you guys. I'll be around if you got any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Now let's hear from Wyoming Representative Chip Nyman, District 1 and House Majority Leader, who was the sponsor of the 2021 bill, HB 229. And I will ask him the same thing. Why did he make it? And what are we going to do if this goes through?
Go, Chip, go!
Well, I sure want to thank everyone for the opportunity to be able to visit with you today. To be able to speak to really honestly a packed house about what we're facing as an industry, it's an honor. And I appreciate the opportunity to be up here before you. I guess I would first want to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm not from here, but I'm not far from here. Our ranch lays in the Belfish River Valley, about 1.5 miles outside of Hewlett, Wyoming, Devil's Tower. We raise red Angus cattle, run about 350 head of cow-calf pairs. Generally buy about 200 to 300 head of red Angus heifer calves. Generally go to Phillip, unless some of you other guys in here, and I'm always asking who's got good red Angus heifer calves they'd like to sell in the fall. Love to chat with you. Our entire livelihoods are based on being able to produce and be in production agriculture, and that's the beef industry. The 6th generation of my family is currently on the ranch. I am honored to be able to have the opportunity to work and to live that type of lifestyle. And the reason that this was important to me is because I could see when I first got in the legislature. Now bear in mind, I've only been in the legislature 4 years. I just ran unopposed for my 3rd term in office in the Wyoming House. And I really didn't get very involved in political aspects of it. Mom and Dad always said, as long as you vote Republican, we won't have to kill you and make another one that looks just like you. And so that's what I was told as a child. And so I was always conservative, voted conservative, never thought about it. I always trusted my legislators. If you had an R behind your name, that meant that you were going to go down there and you were going to work for me, to smaller government, protecting life, protecting private property rights, fighting for our Constitution, and all those different rights and privileges that we as Americans get to enjoy. Well, the reality of it is as I got more involved in the process and was asked to run as a precinct committee person, and that speaks to what everybody else has said today so far, you've got to be involved. One gentleman said it back there, and it's so true, and I've heard it before. If you're not at the table, you'll be on the table. And that's where we're at as the beef industry, and that's where we're at as agriculturalists in this United States. I noticed that we were not getting the representation, I felt, to protect our industries. And so I ran and I won. And it was kind of adding it on to everything else. We were running cattle and raising kids, and we had a feed store there in Hewlett, and had a lot of responsibilities, a lot of things going on. But it doesn't matter, because to quote someone that I think all of us need to keep in mind, Edmund Burke said, all it takes for tyranny to prosper is for good people to do nothing and to believe that somebody else is going to fight for you. Well, I'm here to tell you, not everybody's working for you. And we've heard a lot about it today. But it requires people in the grassroots to stand up and to take the initiative to step up to the plate and tell people and to make your politicians, your representatives accountable because they work for you. They serve you. Many times we've seen that they've lost that focus. We've lost that ability to realize that we're not there to be served. Our responsibility as legislators, like Marty and others, is to go and represent you and work for you in these state capitals. Well, as you would well know, I worked with Harriet Hageman and Bill Bullard. They were integral in helping me to be able to craft this legislation. And what we basically did was we took the 2013 decision, and when we saw this coming, because the Foxes and the Hunts were both in this lawsuit, Harriet was fighting for them, and it was brought to my attention that we've got to do something as a state to codify into our state statutes this 2013 decision, and that's exactly what we did. And to give you an idea of how supported it was, and I feel badly for Marty, and it just blows me away that South Dakota, like a state that you guys are so steeped in agriculture, would struggle to be able to get this passed. That piece of legislation, when we drafted it and brought it through the Wyoming legislature, both houses, the House and the Senate, through committee work, through everything, I had one dissenting vote. And that was by an attorney out of Cheyenne, Wyoming, and I still to this day do not know what his issue was. But that was the only one. He voted for it on introduction, all the way through everything, and then we got up to the very last end, and it was 60 members of the House at that point, and we were voting on it, and everybody was aye, and he voted nay. So I don't know what the deal was there, but the reality of it is it proved to me how important it is to be able to protect the choices and the freedoms of the people of the state of Wyoming as they saw it. We needed that latitude to be able to identify our livestock the way we saw fit. And they recognized immediately when we were giving testimony that this was for an ultimate end. And I think all of us really realize that. And as I look at this, and I talked to Tracy Hunt, he was very instrumental in working with this, and Harriet's work and Bill Bullard's work in this was just phenomenal. To be able to work with those people to navigate through the process. And as a freshman legislator, when I passed this, that was quite a feat. Scared to death, not knowing exactly what you're doing, but because the cause was right, and because the cause is just, it works. But it works also with the support of the people that are going to be most impacted and affected by it. And unless you eat grass only, if you eat meat, this is going to affect you. And it's going to affect my children and my grandchildren. And that's why we crafted it. A couple of things that I wanted to kind of bring up. These ear tags, if they're mandatory, the justification will be, and we've already talked about, is disease traceability. And you know, when you hear that, everybody wants to help everybody else. It sounds good. But the reality of it is, it will be effectively for use in identifying and registering your premises. And that's the discussion that we had in Wyoming. Do we want to have everything identified? Do we want to allow, when these large packers and producers are processors, control currently 85% of the market right now? That was the current figures I just got off the internet yesterday. So what they would tell you is, okay, that's fine. You don't have to have this RFID, but good luck selling to the 15% that are going to be able to compensate you for your product. And effectively, it destroys the market. You're going to have to come around or you'll go out of business. We tried a little bit in Wyoming. We built quite a few small processing plants in an effort to try to diversify and create more marketing opportunities, but that's not enough. The reality of it is our federal government wants to control and regulate, and whatever they regulate, they will control. That's a fact. I travel quite a bit and talked to quite a few different legislators, and I had a gentleman from Illinois, and he had some very interesting, we just casually talking about it. So where are you from? What do you do? Well, we ranch outside of Gila, Wyoming, Devil's Tower. You know, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. If you ever saw the movie, you saw our ranch. It was in there multiple times. So all he was interested in that. Well, I raised cattle in Illinois, and we got talking about this very issue and about beef quality assurance and all that. And he says, you know what? He said, if I don't take a class in Illinois right now, he said, there's livestock markets that I can't sell my cattle in. I have to certify a 2-hour training to be able to even market my cattle in sale barns in Illinois. And he said another thing that really ripped people apart was the governor of Illinois, evidently according to this gentleman, required or signed an executive order that all the livestock at the Illinois State Fair had to have an RFID or they could not participate. That was a governor's executive order that was signed. So as we talk about, you know, the issues that we're seeing here with the federal government and their overreach, it is a state issue. It is a local issue. It is something that we have to be very, very cognizant of and realize that our government officials have to hear our voice to say we're not going to stand for this. I've been in meetings in Wyoming. Wyoming myself, we produce 40% of the energy that we use in this country. And I was in a legislative meeting one time, and we're trying to push back against, just like this, the attack on our legacy energy industries, coal, oil, natural gas, all these things. And I was listening to one of my government officials say, oh, you guys, you can just stand there and beat your chest and say you're not going to comply with all this CO2 and you're not going to comply with this oil mandates and the restrictions on the permitting. But eventually, the government's going to take it. They're going to have to tell us what to do, and we're going to have to submit. Ladies and gentlemen, I tell you the truth. We do not have to submit. We do not have to just roll over and take this because we are somehow beholden to them. Freedom is not exclusive to Washington, D.C. Freedom is where you're at right now. And if you want to take a hold of it and you want to control that destiny that you have for you and the generations to come, then this is where you make your stand. If we don't, it's over. Our markets will diminish. Those that are in positions of authority and power will take what responsibility we should have taken at the opportune time, and they will tell us what we will or we will not do. I don't believe we're going to do that. I am so encouraged to hear today what is being said, and the entities that are working together, and all of you assembled here today have a specific vested interest in making sure that this is pushed back, stopped. Let your legislators know, and if they won't listen, vote the booger out. Get somebody in there that will respect you, your values, your views, and your beliefs, and stand up for your rights because they work for you. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. You guys have a great day.
Thank you, Chip. So we invited South Dakota Senator Rounds, Senator Thune, and Representative Johnson. They were all unable to attend. However, they have provided us with some commentary that I would ask that be played now in no uncertain order. So, if you would, please.
All right, we all know that we've got a federal government that's overreaching, that is overburdensome. I need to be your advocate in Washington, D.C., and I'm working hard to do just that. That's why I've been working with Harriet Hageman. She and I have been pushing back on the Forest Service on this whole ridiculous situation with the mods. I've talked to Mr. Maud. I understand where the family is coming from. And we have asked some pretty hard questions to USDA that they need to get us answers to. In fact, I talked to Harriet earlier today to make sure that we've got a backup plan for what we're going to do if the Forest Service doesn't give us the kind of information that we have been asking for. When it comes to things like protecting our farmland, I've also been a top leader in Congress in making it clear that we're not going to let the Chinese Communist Party or their partners or other foreign actors come in and buy up our farmland or our agricultural processing facilities. I've been a leader in making sure that we're adding shackle space outside of the Big Four. We have let the big packers get entirely too much power over the marketplace. A free market is many buyers and many sellers. That is not what we have in meat packing right now. My Butcher Block Act, my A Plus Act, other bills, we've been successful in adding that capacity outside of the Big Four. I'm going to keep working on that as well. When it comes to making sure that the electronic ID tags, that we're pushing back on that. I voted last year to defund that rule. I know you've got real concerns, and I'm carrying those concerns forward in Washington, D.C. Obviously, we have got a lot of issues at play. I should also mention country of origin labeling. I've got a bill in the House. There are a number of them, but I've got one that would make it clear this needs to be a top priority for the administration. Obviously, the fact that we're not able to put true country of origin labeling onto these great American steaks and other beef products is ridiculous. We got a lot of work to do, but we have gotten some important things done together. I'm going to keep being the fighter, the voice that you need in Washington. Thanks.
Hi, Mike Rounds here. My dad used to tell me a story in the South Dakota legislature about an old Norwegian legislator who spoke with a little bit of a Norwegian accent. And his message to lobbyists and to other members of the House and the Senate was, if you got the votes, you can do whatever you want. Well, I wish I could say that we had the votes right now to be able to fix a problem that the Department of Ag at the federal level is imposing on you. They have successfully put together a rule which is going to require you to have RFID tags on all of your breeding stock if you're going to transport it interstate, from state to state. We've sent in the message personally during the comment period that we thought this was not the right thing to do, and we explained why. A lot of you sitting in the audience have done exactly the same thing, and you've been joined by literally thousands of people across the United States that are in the industry that have tried to explain to the department and to APHIS, and unfortunately to a couple of the other ag groups, that this is not the right thing to do and that this is government overreach. We haven't won that battle at this stage of the game. So even though there may be a possibility of some people saying they're going to give you free tags and so forth, the bottom line is this is overreach. And this is the kind of stuff that we've got to be able to stop in the future. Now, the reason why I'm sharing it this way is I wish I had better news, but I don't. We don't have the votes. We don't have the votes to be able to send the powerful message that we have to federal regulators. But there's another bigger issue coming up, and that's mandatory country of origin labeling. If we want to succeed in getting MCOOL onto the Farm Bill, we've got to be able to show to them that we've got support. Right now, there are only, there's 18 of us in the United States Senate, members of the Senate, that have states in which there are more cows than there are people in their states. So we've basically got 18 people to work with in order to bring about getting a majority vote to get MCOOL into the Farm Bill, or at least to get something started on it. The only way we're going to win this thing is if we get consumers to understand what a big deal this is, and that truth in advertising is important. But that means we got to broaden our base. We don't have a big enough base right now to actually say that we've got the votes in order to get this stuff done. It's frustrating, but we got to get started. I wish I could tell you right now we had the votes to stop what the federal government is trying to do in overreach. We don't. There's still a possibility of a court case that could stop it as government overreach. But nonetheless, this is a case of where we need the ag community to be speaking in one voice. That's really important, and we don't have that today. Look, I know you're rallying there to try to stop this stuff. I agree with you 100%. This is government overreach. But the bottom line is we got to broaden our appeal. We've got to broaden our ability. We've got to do a better job of getting more people on board, and that starts with getting your friends and family and associates in other parts of the states around the United States to join with us in this cause. I look forward to working with you. I wish I had better news on this thing here, and I would love to have your input about the right path forward. We'll work with you as best we can, but right now I just got to tell you, the old boy, the old Norwegian, he said it right. If you got the votes, you can get things done. If you don't, you're probably not going to be successful. Let's get those votes. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Senator John Thune. I'm grateful for the opportunity to thank you for the work that you do to advocate for the many stock growers across our state. During my travels across South Dakota, I often hear from producers about the urgent need for Congress to get a Farm Bill done, and I want to assure you it's one of my top priorities. With net farm income projected to decline by 25% this year, and with input costs projected to hit a record high, it is especially important that we make sure that farmers and ranchers have the support that they need to carry on with their vital work. That is why any farm bill that Congress takes up must put more farm and ranch priorities in it and work to strengthen farm safety net programs and improve ag conservation programs. I am proud to have introduced the American Beef Labeling Act that would reinstate mandatory country of origin labeling for beef and provide more transparency in labeling to benefit both producers and consumers. South Dakota ranchers work tirelessly to produce some of the highest quality beef in the world. As a longtime supporter of MCOOL, I am proud to lead this legislation and will continue fighting to get it signed into law. Among my other priorities for the Farm Bill are the Strengthening Local Processing Act, which would give small food processors more access to information that is critical to food safety planning, allow more inspector-approved meat products to be sold across state lines, and funnel federal dollars toward training, education, and technical assistance grants. As you know, I have long been a supporter of working lands conservation programs, which is why I introduced the Conservation Reserve Program Improvement Act. This legislation would provide cost share opportunities for grazing infrastructure, including fencing and water distribution on CRP contracts. We are working to ensure that CRP continues to be an effective option for producers and landowners, and to advance the multiple use benefits of this conservation program, including wildlife habitat and livestock forage potential. As it relates to EID tags, which I know is among the reasons you are here this morning, it is important to remember that they can and are being used today by producers. The 2013 animal disease traceability rules have worked well, providing timely and accurate traceback for animal disease. EID can be a helpful tool in animal disease prevention, but flexibility paired with accountability is always better than another government mandate on producers. Again, thank you for your work to support stock growers and protect livelihoods. Keep up the great work.
Again, I want to thank Senator Rounds, Senator Thune, and Representative Johnson for taking time to at least provide these clips for us of what they're doing in Washington. Bill seems to tell me that he forgot to say something, so I'm going to let him have 1 minute.
The final rule goes into effect November 5. There's an important exception in the rule. It says if you have an animal that is already officially identified with a metal ear clip or a plastic tag, official USDA tag, that tag is good for the life of the animal. So if you're weaning and you lost some tags, you can put them in your cows by November 4th because the new rule goes into effect November 5th. So any animal that is tagged with an official tag on or before November 4th for the life of the animal will not have to be RFID tagged. So that's an option that you have to avoid having to comply with this rule. Thank you.
Good point. I'll say it now, and I said it at the beginning. What you put in your toolbox to use that works for your operation, whether it be this or this, that's your personal choice. Continue to do that if it works for you. But don't let the government tell us we have to use these. I need to say some thank yous here. First off, United States Cattlemen's Association and RCAF for putting this together, hosting this great event. We stand here strong, publicly voicing our concerns in unison. I want to thank the state organizations that have supported this, the South Dakota Stock Growers, South Dakota Farmers Union, the Montana Cattlemen's Association, Oklahoma Independent Stock Growers Association, Independent Cattlemen of Wyoming, Independent Cattlemen of Nebraska, Independent Beef Association of North Dakota, Independent Cattlemen of Missouri, Iowa Stock Growers Association, Cattle Producers of Washington, Colorado Independent Cattle Growers Association, Buckeye Quality Beef Association in Ohio, and Southern Colorado, Buckeye Quality Beef Association, Southern Colorado Livestock Association. I also want to thank these individuals that while we were putting this together has provided financial assistance. Crawford Livestock out of Nebraska, Fort Pierre Livestock, Winter Livestock, St. Ange Livestock out of South Dakota, Valentine Livestock, Gordon Livestock out of Nebraska, Roger and Betty Dickoff, Vaughn and Lois Meyer. And I thank you all that donate today to help us, because as you know, it takes money to compensate speakers and everything else. So we're not pocketing this, guys. We're trying to get our voices out. I also want to thank Cattle USA and DV Auctions for live streaming this here in person. I want to big shout out to Madison Sound, our sound people. They will be recording this today, and hopefully we will have that up as soon as we can. I'd like to call South Dakota Stock Growers President Chuck Willard to give us a prayer over our country and the meal. After I get done, we're going to have beef served. And so anyhow, Chuck.
Thank you, and it is very exciting to see everybody that turned out today. And I'm encouraged. I hope you are. I hope you're excited enough to take this home, what you've learned today, so we can expand on that. But I guess I'd like to bring something that hasn't been said yet to the table. You know, God wants to bless this country, and He blessed it originally. And what we see in our country today is chaos. And I can tell you with all confidence and with absolute truth the reason for that, and it's simple. We left God out. We left God out of our homes. We left God out of our schools. We left God out of our government. And sadly, in some churches, we've left God out. And I can tell you with all confidence and with absolute truth, the simple reason we can get out of that and ask God to bless this country once again. And I'm going to quote 2 Chronicles 7:14. And that says, if my people who are called by my name, that means Christians. It doesn't mean all of America has to do this. Christians, if we call on God's name, if we humble ourselves and we seek God's face and ask Him to forgive us and to turn from our wicked ways, then, God said, I will hear in heaven, and I will forgive you, and I will heal your nation. Friends, we need to put our trust first in God, and then all these things that are working for. Because if we don't, we're going to fail. We're not only fighting a physical battle here, we're fighting an unseen battle also. We need to put our faith and trust in the Lord Jesus Christ and put God back into our families, and God back into our schools, and God back into our government, and God where He should be in our churches. You can't have revival without repentance. And even when our country started, it has to start in the church. So please, if you would stand and pray with me. Lord, we give you thanks and praise today, for you are an awesome God. You are a God who loves us and wants to bless us. You're a sovereign God who created and sustains everything. Your power is without measure. And we know, Lord, through our faith, that you can set things straight. Lord, today help us to search our hearts. Reveal to us where we're falling short in our own personal lives. And to ask you to come in and fill us with your Holy Spirit to push all unclean thoughts out. And then, Lord, God bless this nation. That's a claim that we can claim because it's in your word, that you will bless this nation once again if we do these things, if we seek your face, if we pray and we turn away from our sin. Thank you today, Lord, for this great group. We are a family, and we will fight the good fight. But Lord, help to remind us to put you first, that you be the focus of our lives. And we ask, Lord, that you would now bless the food that's been provided for us. And we ask all these things in the blessed and precious name of our Lord Jesus Christ. And all God's children said, amen.
I am going to leave you today with the Livestock Producers Bill of Rights. This is on the South Dakota Stock Growers website. It's also on the back side of our page. The right, having policy supporting the following, we hereby declare this to be the Livestock Producers and Property Owners Bill of Rights. The right to possess personal property, including livestock. Number 2, the right to manage our personal property and the premises thereof. 3, the right to choose identification methods for our personal property, including verification, documentation, and repository of information. 4, the right to market, transfer, and receive personal property, including livestock. 5, the right to label the origin of livestock production like any other industry and country. 6, the right to privacy of our property and within our property. And 7, the right to keep and uphold all genuine rights and spacious rights endowed within the 5th and 14th Amendments of our Constitution. May God bless you. Thank you for coming.